Aita, drama, secrets, confessions. Welcome to Trove Reddit.
I never thought my parents could do something like that. In the shining mansion, with the scent of expensive perfume still lingering in the air, they pushed me out as if I were a broken object. Not a single explanation. Not a final embrace. Only the iron gate closing behind me, cold and heavy like a sentence being passed. I knelt on the stone floor, their polished shoes still reflected in my eyes, but my heart had long since frozen. That night, I realized wealth could never buy a drop of love. I was thrown onto the street like trash, and the whole neighborhood whispered, "The rich kid got kicked out just like that." But what they didn't know was that very moment marked the beginning of a life no one could have ever imagined. If you want to know what happens next, hit that subscribe button right now. I thought I had lost everything on that fateful night. My parents shut the gate, and there I sat, clutching a small bag like a beggar stranded in the middle of a castle. Everything around me was silent, eerily silent. But right then, a familiar voice echoed behind me. Mrs. May. The old nanny who had cared for me since the days I first learned to speak. She stood there, her hands trembling with age, yet her eyes were blazing, as if to say she would never abandon me. I remember every word she spoke, "If they don't need you, then I do." Can you believe it, that a single sentence could make me cry like a child? She took off the old scarf from her neck and wrapped it around me. In the faint warmth of that worn wool, I realized I hadn't been completely cast aside by the world. Then she untied her apron, set the master's house keys on the kitchen table, and walked out through that great iron gate with me. Who would ever dare give up a stable job for a child branded as worthless? We walked past the rows of wealthy houses. People stared, people whispered, people sneered. I heard one of them clearly say, "She's gone mad, giving up her career for that abandoned boy." But Mrs. May never turned back. She held my hand tight. And we just kept walking, under the dim yellow streetlights, as if stepping out of a fake world in search of a place that truly belonged to us. That night, I slept on a rickety bed in her tiny apartment. No marble countertops. No crystal chandeliers. Only the creaking sound of an old ceiling fan. But I slept better than I ever had in that luxurious mansion. Because at least, I knew I was no longer alone. And I still wonder, even now, if Mrs. May hadn't stepped forward that night, would my life have ended right there on that cold sidewalk? What do you think? The apartment Mrs. May took me to was truly another world. Peeling walls. Creaking wooden floors. The smell of cigarette smoke from the next room seeping into every corner. Compared to the gold-plated mansion I once lived in, this place was nothing more than an empty box. Yet strangely, I felt freer than ever before. That first night, she spread a thin blanket for me, while she herself lay down on the cold floor. I watched her and felt my throat tighten. Who would believe that a woman with no blood ties to me would sacrifice herself this much? Can you believe that sometimes strangers can love us more than our own parents? In the days that followed, I saw her working tirelessly. Cleaning offices in the early morning. Mopping supermarket floors at night. Her shoes torn apart, her heels cracked and bleeding, yet she never once complained. Whenever I asked, "Grandma, aren't you tired?" she would just smile and whisper, "Tired, yes. But as long as you still have faith, I'll still have strength." I still remember one time I scribbled a few words on paper. The letters were backward, the lines crooked and messy. I was so ashamed I was about to crumple it up and throw it away. But she snatched it from my hands and pinned it right on the wall. "It's beautiful. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be yours." That moment was like a spark lighting a fire in my heart. Have you ever been criticized so much that you forgot your own true worth? Life in that cramped apartment was full of neighbors arguing, heavy smoke, and the smell of cheap food. But in the midst of all that ordinariness, Mrs. May created a safe space for me. A place where I could make mistakes, fall down, and still be lifted back up. And it was from this tiny, fragile place that my life began to change. Do you want to know how a boy once thrown away became a name the whole world couldn't ignore? Hit that subscribe button right now, because the next chapter of this story will shock you even more. One evening, I saw Mrs. May sitting there, lost in thought, her eyes fixed on an old wedding ring. It was the last relic of a marriage that had shattered years ago. And then, without a word, she took it, and sold it. Can you picture that? A woman who had already lost everything, still willing to give up her final keepsake. Just to buy me an old laptop. The screen was scratched. The keyboard was missing the letter N. But in my arms, it felt like treasure. The machine burned hot after only minutes of use. Its fan groaned and rattled like a voice crying in pain. Yet to me, it wasn't junk. It was a doorway, a portal into another world. I powered it on, and strange lines of code lit the screen. It looked like an alien language. Hard. Impossible. And still, I chased it like a dying man chasing water. Have you ever felt it? When the world sees you as nothing, and suddenly, you find the one thing that brings you back to life? Night after night, I sat cross-legged on the floor, hammering those stiff keys until my fingers went numb. Sometimes the screen went black, the power cord loose again. I'd slam the desk, ready to give up, ready to throw it away. But at that exact moment, Mrs. May would set down a plate of hot rice beside me. "Eat," she would say. "Then try again. Nothing precious ever comes easy." And I'd wonder, if not for her, would I have quit after my very first failure? The neighbors began to notice. They whispered, "That boy, always clinging to that broken computer. What a waste of time." But then, someone else muttered, "Strange. It looks like he's teaching himself something people pay thousands of dollars to learn." That line stuck in my head. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was walking a path no one else could see. So I kept typing. Kept testing. Kept failing. And in every mistake, I heard a new rhythm. Not the fragile heartbeat of someone abandoned, but the steady pulse of someone beginning to wake up. And I ask you, have you ever believed that a single old computer could change the fate of a life? I had no teacher. No fancy classroom. Only a damp little room, a battered old laptop, and Mrs. May's hopeful eyes watching me every night. That was my school. And it was also my battlefield. Day after day, I wrestled with lines of code like a blind man stumbling through a jungle. Some nights, I worked until morning, my eyes burning, my hands trembling from hunger. And just when I was about to give up, Mrs. May would gently knock on the door. "You can do it." Simple words. But you know, sometimes a short sentence can be stronger than an entire army. Have you ever felt that, when all it takes is one person believing in you for you to keep going? I began experimenting with small projects. A rent management app for the landlord. A budgeting tool for the single mother living downstairs. At first, everyone laughed. That kid's just messing around. But then, one by one, the apps worked, the problems got solved, and people grew quiet. Has it ever happened to you, being laughed at, right before they realize you can actually do it? Little by little, the sound of my keyboard was no longer meaningless noise. It became the rhythm of growth. Each time I built something useful, I felt as if I had won a hidden battle. No one saw the blood. But every wound of an abandoned childhood, every scar of loneliness, slowly healed, through those glowing lines of code in the night. I realized I wasn't just learning to program. I was learning how to live. Learning how to turn pain into power. Learning how to transform a dark, cramped room into a laboratory that could change my life. And if you're hearing this story right now, I want to ask you, do you dare to take your own pain and use it to write a new chapter? If you believe that the abandoned ones can still create miracles, hit that subscribe button now, so you don't miss what comes next. The first message came at 2 a.m. I thought it was spam. But it turned out to be a young investor who liked to take risks. He said he had tried my rent tracking app. He said it was rough. But fast. And real. Do you believe a random message can change your entire life? We got on a video call using my laptop that burned like a stove. The screen flickered. I was sweating. Mrs. May sat behind me, fanning herself with a bamboo fan. I pitched my idea with a voice trembling like a guitar string. I talked about poor housing projects nobody bothered to build software for. I talked about tiny bills that suffocated entire families. And I asked him if he dared to bet on a kid who had been thrown out of his own house. Would you place that bet? He laughed. Then he wired the money. A small amount. But to me, it was thunder breaking a drought. That night, we bought our first proper meal in months. Mrs. May ate slowly, as if she were afraid the dream might shatter. I looked at her wrinkled hands. And I swore those hands would never tremble from need again. I bought a sturdy old wooden desk. A chair that didn't break my back. And new shoes for her. Shoes that shone like the moon straying into a dark alley. Have you ever seen happiness inside a pair of shoes? Then another message came. A shop owner said my app saved her from debt. I didn't save anyone. I just wrote a few lines of code. But suddenly I understood. If one small tool could light up a single household, then a whole neighborhood could shine if I did it right. Have you ever heard the switch click on inside your head? We scraped together enough to buy an old car. The engine coughed like an old man changing seasons. But it carried me to meetings no one thought I dared to knock on. I walked into boardrooms in a borrowed dress shirt, pitching ideas that had once been laughed at in the hallways of the housing block. One person said no. 2 people said no. The third person nodded yes. And the wheel began to spin faster. I still slept little. Still feared rejection. But for the first time, I saw the road ahead lit up like a highway at night. No longer a dead end, but an exit. Are you ready to hit the gas when your tank is down to the last line? I still remember the day the first newspaper published a story about me. The headline ran across the front page, "The boy once abandoned by his parents, now a rising tech phenomenon." I stared at it, half laughing, half with tears in my eyes. Back then, they called me trash. Today, they call me a genius. Do you see how life can be nothing but a cruel joke? I walked into glamorous tech conferences. Camera flashes bursting nonstop. People pushing forward just to shake my hand. I heard them call me by the name I built for myself. Not the name of the family who once slammed the gate in my face. But the name forged from sweat and tears. Do you believe a shabby little room can produce a legend? In the crowd, there was always one person sitting quietly. Not in a suit. Not in polished shoes. Just an old wool scarf wrapped around her head, eyes brimming with tears yet glowing with pride. That was Mrs. May. The woman who never understood a single line of code, but was the only reason I ever wrote any of it. I remember one product launch where the host introduced me with extravagant praise. The crowd thundered with applause. But I only turned to look at her. And in my heart, I whispered, "Without you, there would be no me." Is there someone in your life like that too? Someone who never abandoned you, even when the whole world turned away? The money came. The fame came. But what made me happiest were still those dinners with her, at a humble table, filled with laughter. Because I knew, all that spotlight was temporary. But the love Mrs. May gave me was eternal. Do you want to know what happened when the very people who once abandoned me came back, pretending they had believed in me all along? If so, don't forget to hit that subscribe button right now, so you won't miss what comes next. 12 years passed in the blink of an eye. I stood backstage at the biggest tech conference of the year. My company's logo covered the giant screen like an artificial sky. The stage lights burned like a miniature sun pressing against my collar. I heard the murmur of the audience, swelling like waves about to crash. Have you ever felt success taste both sweet and bitter in the same minute? The MC called my name with the tone of a war trumpet. I stepped out, and the lights exploded beneath my feet like fireworks. Every step pulled up buried memories, pounding at the door. I spoke about a new platform helping poor neighborhoods manage their finances. I spoke about data, about justice, about the people who had never been served. Do you believe technology can save an entire community? Just as the applause echoed, 2 figures rose from the VIP row. Expensive clothes. Polished smiles. Eyes that pretended they had never done anything wrong. My biological parents. My heart skipped, sliding sideways like a car losing grip on ice. They walked onto the stage without an invitation. Cameras flashed like a storm of lightning. My mother wrapped her arm around my shoulder in front of the lenses, whispering just loud enough for everyone to hear, "We only wanted to make you stronger." Hearing that, I felt like I was watching a fake reality show. Do you think adults sometimes act better than professional actors? My father patted my shoulder, smiling gently like some returning saint. He said everything that happened had been part of a strategy. He said without that shock, there would be no me today. The crowd buzzed like someone had turned the volume all the way up. Some nodded, buying into the story because it sounded convincing. Others stared at me, waiting for the twist. I felt Mrs. May at the edge of the stage, silent as a horizon. Her hands clasped together, her eyes never leaving me. I knew this moment would decide whose story it became. Theirs, the ones rewriting the past in golden ink. Or hers, the one who wrote my future with calloused hands. Which side would you choose, when truth and glory tear each other apart under the spotlight? I took a deep breath, pressed the microphone to my lips like touching the edge of a blade. And I chose not to say a word, yet. I let silence do the work of a storm. Are you ready to hear the real answer? I stood at the center of the stage like I was standing at the crossroads of two lives. On one side was polished glory. On the other, memory scented with smoke and sweat. The spotlight burned into my face like an interrogation. I heard my heart pounding like war drums. Have you ever been forced to choose between truth and convenience? My parents smiled flawlessly for the cameras. They told a story smooth as a perfume commercial. They said everything was just a carefully designed challenge. They claimed I was the product of a brilliant plan. I looked down at my shoes and laughed silently to myself. What kind of plan begins by throwing a child out on the street? I lifted the microphone. The air thickened. Someone coughed. Someone whispered, guessing whether I would play nice or cut sharp. Which would you choose? I know people love neat stories, I said slowly, like rewinding a tape. But my life has never been neat. I wasn't shaped in a boardroom. I was shaped in a tiny kitchen where the rice always boiled later than the hunger. Can you smell truth when it walks into the room? I spoke about nights when the screen flickered off, then sputtered back on. About trembling hands that never once let go, belonging to an old woman. About learning from zero and living from below zero. About little apps that saved a fridge from being empty. About an old car coughing smoke but carrying new dreams. Have you ever driven a broken dream and still made it forward? The hall was silent, like a lake before a storm. My parents kept smiling, but the corners of their lips trembled. I turned toward the wings, where a figure stood tall, like the milestone of my life. I wanted to call her name right then. But I didn't. I still had one last stitch to close the tear in this story. I didn't grow because of strategy. I survived because of loyalty. I wasn't pushed away to become stronger. I was abandoned, and I had to choose strength for myself. Do you see the difference? I paused, lowered the microphone to my chest, and looked straight at the VIP row as if through the thick glass of memory. Tonight, I will return the truth to its rightful owner. The entire hall leaned forward, ready to fall into the silence. Are you ready to witness who really raised a legend? If you want to know who I called into the spotlight, and why the entire auditorium erupted, hit like, share, and subscribe right now so you won't miss the next chapter. I stood at the center of the stage like I was standing at the crossroads of two lives. On one side was polished glory. On the other, memory scented with smoke and sweat. The spotlight burned into my face like an interrogation. I heard my heart pounding like war drums. Have you ever been forced to choose between truth and convenience? My parents smiled flawlessly for the cameras. They told a story smooth as a perfume commercial. They said everything was just a carefully designed challenge. They claimed I was the product of a brilliant plan. I looked down at my shoes and laughed silently to myself. What kind of plan begins by throwing a child out on the street? I lifted the microphone. The air thickened. Someone coughed. Someone whispered, guessing whether I would play nice or cut sharp. Which would you choose? I know people love neat stories, I said slowly, like rewinding a tape. But my life has never been neat. I wasn't shaped in a boardroom. I was shaped in a tiny kitchen where the rice always boiled later than the hunger. Can you smell truth when it walks into the room? I spoke about nights when the screen flickered off, then sputtered back on. About trembling hands that never once let go, belonging to an old woman. About learning from zero and living from below zero. About little apps that saved a fridge from being empty. About an old car coughing smoke but carrying new dreams. Have you ever driven a broken dream and still made it forward? The hall was silent, like a lake before a storm. My parents kept smiling, but the corners of their lips trembled. I turned toward the wings, where a figure stood tall, like the milestone of my life. I wanted to call her name right then. But I didn't. I still had one last stitch to close the tear in this story. I didn't grow because of strategy. I survived because of loyalty. I wasn't pushed away to become stronger. I was abandoned, and I had to choose strength for myself. Do you see the difference? I paused, lowered the microphone to my chest, and looked straight at the VIP row as if through the thick glass of memory. Tonight, I will return the truth to its rightful owner. The entire hall leaned forward, ready to fall into the silence. Are you ready to witness who really raised a legend? If you want to know who I called into the spotlight, and why the entire auditorium erupted, hit like, share, and subscribe right now so you won't miss the next chapter. The entire hall fell silent, so quiet I could hear the metallic sound of the microphone brushing against the ring on my hand. The dazzling lights pierced my face like thousands of blades. My biological parents sat in the VIP row, holding their breath, waiting for me to choose a side. Meanwhile, I could hear my own heartbeat pounding like the alarm drums of a festival. Have you ever stood on the edge of two cliffs, one side glory, the other side truth? I turned toward the wings of the stage. The stage lights spilled out like a tidal wave, pulling along every beat of my heart. Mrs. May was still standing there. A woman with hair as silver as ashes, but eyes shining like diamonds. She wasn't crying, she wasn't smiling, she was simply waiting. Do you believe a single gaze can keep a person from collapsing? I raised the microphone. Every word I spoke hit the ground like a hammer strike. The one who raised me is not sitting in the VIP row. The one who taught me to stand tall never needed flashing lights. The one who pulled me back from the abyss is right here. The entire audience turned toward the wings. Can you imagine thousands of heads turning at the exact same moment? Mrs. May stepped out. The light swallowed her silhouette, turning every step into the stride of a living legend. The crowd leapt to their feet, applause crashing like a storm ripping through rooftops. I saw my biological parents freeze, their faces stiffening like shattered stone. Cameras flashed endlessly, capturing a moment that could never be undone. Do you think the truth, when unleashed, is more powerful than a bomb going off? I dropped to my knees in the middle of the stage, right before her. I didn't care about the elegant gown or the dazzling lights. I only wanted the world to know who truly lit the torch of my life. My voice trembled, yet echoed across the hall. From this day on, every medal of mine will carry her name. The hall erupted. A sea of people cried while laughing. That night, I knew history would not be written about a successful entrepreneur. It would be written about an ordinary woman who created the extraordinary. And if you want to know the earth-shattering secret that happened right after this tribute, don't forget to subscribe, because the next part will be so intense, you won't want to blink. And after 12 long years, the truth finally came out. A secret buried in silence. A reunion no one thought would ever happen. But this is not the end. Because every secret always carries another shadow. And sometimes, what's revealed is only the beginning. If this story shook you, don't forget to hit subscribe. Because the next chapter may be even more unbelievable than this one.